Good morning. My name is Mike Sherling. I have the privilege of serving as the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for the state of Vermont. And let me begin by asking for another round of applause for Mary and all the great work that she's doing. And I'm going to do this like 3 times. The next one's for Paul and the crew putting on such a great conference. He's going to hate this part, but we're going to ask him to do this again at some point. And let me thank all of you for all the great work that you're doing in promoting the climate economy and protecting our climate and the environment, and from the commerce and community development perspective in growing our local, statewide, and regional economies with the innovations that are going on. It's my privilege to introduce someone who will become known today as the $500 million man, right? You're all laughing. We're meeting with him later. If he comes back with the pocket snipped out of his pants, you'll know why. Jigar Shah is the co-founder of Generate Capital, a specialty finance company that builds, owns, and operates and finances infrastructure assets involving the world's critical resources: energy, water, agriculture, and basic minerals. Generate's team has decades of collective experience financing billions of dollars of sustainable infrastructure. Every week you can catch him on Green Tech Media's Energy Gang podcast. He's perhaps best known as the founder of SunEdison, where he pioneered no money down solar and unlocked a multi-billion-dollar solar market, creating the largest solar services company worldwide. In 2009, he joined Richard Branson to be the first CEO in the Carbon War Room, a global nonprofit commitment to supporting global entrepreneurs as they scale their climate solutions. I'll notice that Richard Branson was in a basement in an island avoiding Hurricane Irma, and Jigar was smart enough not to bunker down in the basement of that wine cellar. He's got broad experience on renewables, electricity, resources, and climate solutions. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Jigar Shah.
Thank you. I think there's worse things in the world than being stuck in a wine cellar with Richard Branson. I really want to thank you guys for having me. I decided that maybe what I should talk about here is just a little bit more of the sort of boring stuff I started with on the fishbowl. It's an extraordinary thing. I've been in the solar industry for 22 years now, so it's been a long time. And the reason why I got to SunEdison was because I kept having these phone calls with people. Just at the time we had 5-watt panels, and we were selling to ranchers mostly who were electrifying their fences and saying, like bringing in utility line was super expensive, and it was much cheaper just to put these 5-watt panels around. And at the 11th hour, they would say, oh, my tractor broke down, I have to fix it up, so the money I had for the solar project, went to that, so let's try next year, right? And so you realized very early on that that's the difference between, a consumer product and infrastructure, right? Infrastructure is not something that, you sort of wait for everyone to pool their money together and decide to get a natural gas line to to get their neighborhood done. That's why most of Westchester, New York still doesn't have natural gas, because they make everyone on the block put up 20 grand before they'll actually extend natural gas into their street. That's a dumb idea, right? That's why we have utility companies like GMP or Burlington Electric or others, so that they can make those decisions and do it in an orderly manner. The other piece of this is around, sort of things that you wouldn't normally call infrastructure, things like digesters. I don't know how many people know what a digester is. There you go. So for many years, we've had digesters on farms, right? Generally speaking, digesters were sort of a compliance technology to, figure out what to do with the manure from dairy cows so that you weren't getting fined by the EPA. There were a lot of rebates and incentives and that kind of stuff that happened. But then what happened was when the rebates and incentives went away, then, the digesters, they still work. But it was sort of like, it's not really cost effective to tinker with it anymore. I don't really want to fix it. It's too small. It doesn't really work. And so today's digesters are now sort of food-based digesters. And so you take a lot of food waste, you add it to the manure. The food guys will actually pay you $25 a ton to take their food waste, whereas the manure coming from dairy cows is generally provided for free, or actually there's a cost to processing it. But that is something that could actually last a test of time and could be infrastructure, right? I mean, Massachusetts has banned food waste from landfills. Vermont's on its way to doing the same thing. And so now the question becomes, how would one roll that out? Like, do we want individual digesters at every farm that is taking in food waste from, every small town in Vermont and, oh, shoot, it just went down because the bugs all died and, we weren't watching it. And then the food waste supplier says, oh, wait, crap, what do I do with my food waste? I got to drive 50 miles farther to drop my food waste, right? So from an infrastructure standpoint, you want a permanent owner of this infrastructure. You want someone whose job it is to make sure that it works, right? Not someone who has it on their farm and says, well, if I get around to it, I'll fix it, but I've got 3 other things to do that are more important than fixing that digester today. And so that's where we're going, right? Like when we're doing this innovation funding and the state of Vermont says, here's your $500,000 grant, or VEIC says, here's your $2 million loan, that's the pilot phase, right? But I think that, hopefully what you're hearing from the speakers today is that we're not there anymore. So we're now in implementation and deployment stage. And so then the question becomes, well, what do people like me want, right? And what I want is pretty simple, right? I want to know that the technology works. I'm not a venture capitalist, right? I want to know that it works. I can't fund a $50 million unit and then realize that, oh, crap, the fundamental science behind it didn't work, or the membrane on the fuel cell, it needs to be replaced every 3 months, and we didn't expect that, right? That's not something I'm supposed to take the risk on, right? So I want to make sure the technology works. It's been around for 20 years. You can see that it works. Digesters are a perfect example of that. There's 1,200 of them working great in Italy and Germany and the UK and other places, and we all know that it works. 2, I want to make sure that I get paid. It's really weird for me to have to say that, right? It's amazing. But I go to people all the time and they say, well, Jigar, we want to build this battery, and I think that it has all these value streams. I read this MIT study, but I don't know. We don't have a contract for it. New England Power Pool might pay for it. Yeah, I'm not confident I'm not going to get paid back for that. So I need to get paid, which means who pays? In the digester case, it's the food waste suppliers, they're paying a tipping fee. There might be electricity generation with the natural gas, and then GMP is buying the electricity, or we just leave it as natural gas and we clean it up, we put it in the pipeline, and we make it renewable natural gas. There's lots of ways to do this, but there has to be contracted cash flows, right? And then the third thing, which is the most important that no one ever seems to focus on, is I have to make sure it works. There's actually somebody who's trained as a maintenance professional whose job it is to go there and make sure that it's working, right? It's amazing how many people, I'm obviously somebody who grew up in the solar industry, but it's amazing how many people come to me and say, well, solar sort of runs itself. It does not run itself, right? It's how many, I remember Toyota called me up one day and they said, Jigar, our bill went up. And I was like, okay, what happened? Well, we bought a solar system, but our bill went up. And I was like, well, did you check the inverter? It was offline for 4 months, right? And, that's not supposed to happen. It should be somebody's job. They had a remote monitoring system, by the way. It's supposed to be somebody's job to open up their computer, look at the remote monitoring system, say, oh, that's a red dot right there. I should click on that. Okay, But people take that for granted, right? And so what I would suggest to all of you is that Today, as opposed to 10 years ago, a lot has changed in 10 years, and mainly, frankly, because of the internet and sensors and things, right? Today, I can tell you what's happening in an anaerobic digester system with 40 sensors because they're like 10 cents a piece now. It used to be like, I remember when I built my first solar system, the utility company said, well, every power plant needs a dedicated phone line, landline, to the power plant. I'm like, mine's on top of a Whole Food store. How am I supposed to do that? Well, I had to like wire in a separate phone line into the utility room to do this stuff, right? You can imagine it cost me like $50 a month to have this thing. Right now, like T-Mobile lets me backhaul using their network for less than $3 a month, right? And so the world has changed. You can like backhaul data, you can create a NOC, Network Operations Center. You can actually do all of these things which you couldn't do cost effectively for small infrastructure 10 years ago. And so that's what's different. But I think it's important to realize that innovation is great, and I fully support more innovation. We need a lot more of it, but deployment is better. And the reason it's better is because that's what keeps young people in Vermont. That's what keeps them excited, right? Like, that's what pays the taxes. That's what actually, like, brings our standard of living up. That's what gets people new infrastructure, new things that actually serves their needs better. And so, as you guys discuss over the next day or so, like, what I would encourage you to think about is that the financing company is a stakeholder in the room, right? I mean, on the one hand, you really want, to figure out what the community wants. You have to figure out, like, what can they get their arms around, what can they agree upon moving forward on. And on the other hand, you have to ask the tough questions, which is like, is that something that can be financed, right? Or is that something that the town just has to do a bond offering and hope and pray that it works? And, if it does, great. If it doesn't, then, well, they just have higher tax bills. And that's the part that I really want to encourage you with. I'll leave you with some raw numbers. The Advanced Energy Economy, which is a great organization that is an umbrella organization that does transport and lots of other clean economy areas, estimated that last year we deployed $200 billion of this technology in the United States of America alone. $200 billion, right? And so when I talk about 500 million, I'm not suggesting something that's never been done before. I'm actually suggesting something that happens probably every 4 hours in this country. And so the real question is around how do you guys, get your dreams and aspirations funded such that Vermont can be this light on the hill around, like what is possible. Not just what is possible technologically, because many of us know what's possible technologically. Dan Riker and others did great work at Department of Energy to prove that to us earlier. But now what's possible from a social fabric standpoint, right? I mean, like, we're moving socially to a new construct that's away from fossil fuels, something that we've been addicted to for a very long time. And so with that, I really want to thank you for your time and look forward to meeting all of you.